A cocky kickboxer storms into an old Brooklyn boxing gym, live streaming to thousands as he mocks every fighter over 50. The young bully shoves aside elderly champions, calling traditional boxing dead while his cameras capture their humiliation. He even dismisses the quiet maintenance man mopping floors, demanding the janitor get out of his way. But what this arrogant fighter doesn't realize is that the soft-spoken maintenance man is Mike Tyson himself. The kickboxer has just disrespected the most devastating knockout artist in heavyweight history, a man who destroyed opponents in seconds during his legendary prime. When Iron Mike finally steps through the ropes, still moving with that iconic peak boost style, the bully's livestream audience explodes with recognition. The kickboxer's crew keeps filming, thinking they're about to capture their boss beating up some old-timer, but they're actually recording the moment their leader faces a living legend. As Tyson removes his work gloves and asks for hand wraps, 47 years of knockout power awakens in those legendary fists. What happens when a social media star picks a fight with boxing royalty? Will the kickboxer survive stepping into the ring with Iron Mike? What happened next would shatter the bully's arrogance forever. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first gray light of dawn crept through the windows of Gleason's boxing gym as Mike turned the key in the heavy steel door. At 58, he moved with quiet purpose through the empty space, his work boots echoing softly on the worn wooden floors. The familiar smell of leather, sweat, and liniment welcomed him home. Mike had been opening the gym at 5:30 every morning for 8 months now. The pay wasn't much, but he didn't need much. Sweeping floors, fixing equipment, and keeping the old Brooklyn institution running gave him something money couldn't buy. Peace. That he walked past the rows of heavy bags hanging like silent sentries, their surfaces scarred by decades of punishment. The speed bags waited motionless on their platforms. 3 boxing rings dominated the main floor, their canvas surfaces bearing the stains of countless battles. But it was the walls that told the real story. Black and white photos of boxing legends lined every surface. Joe Frazier throwing his devastating left hook. Muhammad Ali floating like a butterfly. Sugar Ray Robinson's perfect form frozen in time. These men had walked through this very gym, their spirits still lingering in every corner. Mike set down his cleaning supplies and walked to the main ring. Without really thinking about it, he slipped between the ropes and began to move. Shadow boxing in the empty gym had become his morning ritual. His hands came up in the classic peekaboo style, elbows tight, head weaving. Even in work clothes. Even at his age, the muscle memory was perfect. His fists cut through the air with surprising speed. Left hook to the body, right uppercut, slip left, counter right. The combinations flowed like water, each punch thrown with the precision of a master craftsman. His breathing remained steady, controlled. This was meditation for him. Pure movement without thought or worry. The spell broke when he heard footsteps on the stairs outside. Mike stepped back through the ropes and picked up his mop, becoming the maintenance man again. Frank DeLuca hobbled through the door first, as he had every morning for 12 years. The 73-year-old former construction worker moved stiffly, his arthritic hands already swollen despite the early hour. "Morning, Mike," Frank said, setting his gym bag on a bench. "Morning, Frank. How are the hands today?" Frank grimaced, holding up his twisted fingers. "Like rusty hinges, you know." Mike nodded and walked to the supply closet. He returned with fresh hand wraps and began the careful process of binding Frank's joints, working with the patient touch of someone who understood pain. His own hands were scarred from years of punishment, but they remained surprisingly gentle. "There," Mike said, adjusting the wraps. "Take it easy on the heavy bag today." Frank flexed his fingers experimentally. The support helped, and Mike's careful wrapping had eased the worst of the stiffness. "Thanks, kid. Don't know what we'd do without you." Other morning regulars began filtering in, mostly older men who'd found purpose and community in this fading temple of boxing. Mike retreated to his maintenance duties as the gym came alive with the sounds of training. By 7 o'clock, the morning rhythm had settled into its familiar pattern. The steady thump of heavy bags mixed with the rapid-fire drumming of speed bags. Older fighters worked at their own pace, respecting their bodies while keeping their skills sharp. Mike was mopping near the windows when Tommy Rodriguez pushed through the front door. The 16-year-old tried to keep his head down, but Mike caught sight of the fresh bruise around his left eye. Purple and swollen, maybe 6 hours old. Tommy grabbed a pair of hand wraps and headed for the smaller ring in the back corner. He moved with the quick, nervous energy of someone who'd learned to stay alert. Mike had seen that walk before, on streets where being careless could cost you everything. The kid started working combinations on the light bag, throwing punches with more anger than technique. Mike watched him for a moment, then went back to his mopping. Some lessons couldn't be taught with words. Near the front desk, voices carried across the gym. Sal Giordano, the gym's owner, was talking with Bobby Martinez, the head trainer. Mike had heard pieces of this conversation before, always in hushed tones when they thought no one was listening. The lease renewal is coming up in 3 months. Sal was saying. They want 40% more. Bobby shook his head. Membership's been dropping for 2 years. These young guys all want those fancy fitness centers with the mirrors and the smoothie bars. I know. But this place has history. Ollie trained here. Frazier. Hagler. History don't pay the rent, Sal. Mike kept mopping, but he felt the weight of their words. Gleason's had been home to champions for 60 years. The thought of it becoming another chain restaurant or boutique store made his chest tight. He finished the floor and walked to the supply closet for window cleaner. As he passed Tommy's corner, he noticed the kid had stopped punching. The teenager sat on a stool, staring at his wrapped hands. Mike set down his cleaning supplies and pulled a $20 bill from his wallet. He approached Tommy quietly, the way you might approach a wounded animal. Champions eat before they train, Mike said, holding out the money. Tommy looked up, surprised. I can't take your money, Mr. Mike. Sure you can, but you get breakfast first, then come back and work the bags proper. Deal. The gratitude in Tommy's eyes said more than words could. He took the 20 and headed for the door, his step a little lighter than before. Mike, you old softy, came a voice from behind him. Walter Murphy stood near the entrance, coffee cup in hand. At 73, Walter moved like a man who'd spent his life being careful and observant. He worked the afternoon shift as the gym's second janitor, but he often came in early just to sit and watch. Kid needs to eat, Mike said simply. Walter nodded and handed him the second cup of coffee he'd brought. They stood together in comfortable silence, 2 old men who'd found friendship in shared work and unspoken understanding. Through the window, Mike noticed a black SUV with tinted windows parked across the street. Someone inside was taking pictures of the gym with a long lens. The vehicle had been there yesterday too, and the day before that. Mike made mental note of the license plate, but said nothing to Walter. Some observations were better kept private until you understood what they meant. The afternoon quiet was shattered at exactly 2 o'clock when Derek Castellano's convoy pulled up outside Gleason's gym. 2 black Mercedes SUVs and a red Ferrari arranged themselves on the street like an invasion force, their engines rumbling. With expensive authority, Derek stepped out of the Ferrari wearing designer workout gear that probably cost more than most people made in a month. At 28, he carried himself with the swagger of someone who'd never faced real consequences. His perfectly styled hair and $1,000 sneakers looked ridiculous in this neighborhood of working-class sweat and honest struggle. Behind him came his entourage, camera operators, social media assistants, and hangers-on who laughed at his jokes and agreed with everything he said. Bridget Kane, his social media manager, was already live streaming on her phone, narrating Derek's arrival for his 2.3 million followers. We're here at some old boxing gym in Brooklyn, Derek announced to the camera. I'm going to show you people what real fighting looks like versus these ancient techniques that stopped working 20 years ago. The gym members paused their training as Derek's crew pushed through the front door. Equipment cases and camera gear filled the entryway while Derek surveyed the space with obvious disgust. Look at this place, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. It's like a museum of failure. When's the last time anyone here won anything that mattered? Mike continued organizing equipment in the corner, but his movements became more deliberate. He'd seen bullies before, in and out of the ring. They all had the same smell, like fear covered up with expensive cologne. Derek strutted toward the main ring where Frank DeLuca was working slowly through his combinations. The old man's arthritic hands moved carefully, each punch thrown with hard-earned technique. Excuse me, Grandpa, Derek said, climbing into the ring. I need this space for some real training. Frank stopped punching and looked around confused. He'd been using this ring every afternoon for 12 years. You were just leaving, Derek interrupted. This is about to be a professional demonstration. The old man climbed out slowly, his dignity intact, but his shoulders slumped. Other gym members watched in uncomfortable silence as Derek's crew began setting up cameras and lights. Mike's jaw tightened slightly, the only sign of the anger building inside him. He moved closer to get a better view, positioning himself near a stack of training gear that needed organizing. Derek began throwing flashy combinations for his cameras, kicks and punches designed more for show than effectiveness. His technique was decent. He wasn't completely fake, but every movement screamed performance over substance. This is what modern fighting looks like, Derek announced to his livestream audience. Not like these old guys throwing the same tired combinations. Their grandfathers taught them. Eddie Santos, a 67-year-old former Golden Gloves champion, was working the heavy bag nearby. Derek noticed the cameras catching him in the background and walked over. "Hey, old-timer," Derek called out. "Show my viewers what pass is for. Boxing in this place." Eddie continued his workout, trying to ignore the interruption. His punches might not have been fast anymore, but they were technically perfect, generations of knowledge distilled into every combination. Derek laughed and made exaggerated punching motions, mocking Eddie's form for his online audience. "Look at this dinosaur. Probably thinks rope-a-dope is still a strategy." Mike stopped organizing and turned to fully observe Derek's behavior. The maintenance man's hands clenched slightly, but his face remained neutral. He'd learned patience the hard way, but watching decent people get humiliated for entertainment tested even his considerable self-control. Tommy approached quietly from behind. "Shouldn't someone stop this?" he whispered. Mike's voice was barely audible. "Sometimes the best teacher is consequence, son." Derek finished his demonstration with a flourish, bowing to his cameras while his crew applauded. He looked around the gym with theatrical satisfaction, feeding off the uncomfortable silence of men who'd been training here longer than he'd been alive. "I'll be back tomorrow," Derek announced loud enough for everyone to hear, with a special challenge for anyone in this place brave enough to step into the real world of combat sports. His entourage began packing up their equipment, already planning their next viral moment. As Derek headed for the door, he deliberately walked past Mike's cleaning station and knocked over the bucket of mop water with his foot. The gray water spread across the clean floor, hours of Mike's careful work destroyed. In an instant, Derek didn't even look back as he strutted outside to his waiting Ferrari, already talking to his cameras about tomorrow's return. Mike stared down at the spilled water, then quietly reached for his mop to clean it up again. The next morning arrived, with the weight of anticipation hanging over Gleason's gym. Mike found graffiti spray painted across the front window when he arrived at his usual time. "Old school equals NO school," in bright red letters. He spent 20 minutes carefully removing it with solvent and a razor blade, working with the same methodical patience he brought to everything else. Vandalism was just another kind of mess to clean up. Another problem that required quiet persistence to solve. By the time the morning members arrived, the window was spotless again. But word of Derek's performance had spread through the boxing community overnight. Eddie Santos looked tired and defeated, his usual enthusiasm dampened by the viral humiliation. "Couldn't sleep much," Eddie confided to Mike as they arranged equipment together. "My grandson called this morning. Said kids at school were showing him videos, laughing at the old man throwing punches." Mike nodded but didn't offer empty comfort. Some pain couldn't be fixed with words, only with justice. And justice, Mike had learned, came to those patient enough to wait for the right moment. Frank DeLuca suggested they ban Derek from returning, but Mike quietly disagreed. "Running from disrespect doesn't teach respect," he said simply. The older fighters looked to Mike for guidance, though they didn't fully understand why. There was something about the quiet maintenance man that commanded attention. The way he moved, the way he observed everything, the careful strength in his weathered hands. He felt familiar somehow, like someone they should recognize but couldn't. Quite placed at exactly 2 o'clock, Derek's convoy returned with reinforcements. This time he brought professional camera equipment, additional crew members, and what appeared to be a local news team. His social media following had grown overnight, feeding on the controversy and anticipation. Derek entered the gym wearing professional kickboxing gear, his appearance more polished and performance-ready than before. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd spent the night reading praise from thousands of online followers. Brooklyn Boxing. Derek announced to his cameras as he set up in the main ring. Today we separate the legends from the has-beens. I'm offering an open challenge to anyone in this gym who thinks old-school techniques can hang with modern combat sports. His livestream audience had grown to over 50,000 viewers, all waiting to see which gym member would be brave enough or foolish enough to face Derek's youth and training. The chat scrolled by rapidly, filled with mocking comments about old guys and washed-up fighters. But the gym's reality was harsh. Eddie's heart condition ruled him out of any physical confrontation. Frank's arthritis made serious sparring impossible. The few younger members like Tommy lacked the experience to safely face someone with Derek's training and size advantage. Derek exploited this weakness perfectly, his comments growing more cruel as the minutes passed. "Look at these cowards," he told his audience. 50 years of boxing tradition, and not one of them has the heart to defend it. Walter Murphy arrived for his afternoon shift and surveyed the scene with sharp eyes. He approached Mike, who continued organizing equipment while observing Derek's performance. "I know who you are," Walter said quietly. "Been watching you help these kids for months. Sometimes a good man has to stop being so good." Mike met Walter's gaze and saw understanding there, the recognition of one warrior by another. Walter had the eyes of someone who'd seen real conflict, not the manufactured drama of social media. Derek's mockery reached its peak when Walter tried to clean around the camera equipment. The younger man physically shoved the 73-year-old janitor, causing him to stumble and catch himself against the ropes. "Get out of my way, old fool," Derek snarled. "I should have you fired for getting in my shot." The gym fell silent, except for the sound of Derek's livestream chat exploding with encouragement for more aggression. Walter straightened slowly, maintaining his dignity despite the assault, but something had changed in Mike's expression. The maintenance man set down his cleaning supplies and began walking toward the ring with purpose. His movements were different. Now, not the careful steps of someone avoiding attention, but the measured approach of someone who'd made a decision. Derek noticed the approaching figure and laughed for his cameras. "Even the janitor wants to fight me now. This is perfect content." Mike stepped through the ropes and stood in the center of the ring, still wearing his work clothes. The contrast was stark. Derek in professional fighting gear facing a man in paint-stained jeans and work boots. "One round," Mike said quietly, his distinctive high-pitched voice carrying clearly through the gym. "Then you leave these people alone." Derek's eyes lit up with opportunity. This was exactly what his followers wanted to see. Young strength dominating old age, modern techniques crushing outdated methods. He couldn't have scripted it better. "You sure about this, Grandpa?" Derek asked, posing for his cameras. "I don't want to hurt you too bad." Mike simply nodded and asked Walter to find him some hand wraps. As he began binding his hands, muscle memory took over. Movements he performed thousands of times, preparation for battle that had been burned into his very bones. The gym members gathered around the ring, sensing something significant was about to happen. Tommy pressed close to the ropes, his young eyes wide with anticipation and worry. Derek continued playing to his online audience, completely unaware that he was about to step into the ring with one of the most devastating knockout artists in the history of combat sports. His arrogance had blinded him to the quiet danger standing just feet away, patiently wrapping hands that had once terrorized the heavyweight division. The bell was about to ring, and Derek Castellano had no idea his world was about to change forever. The next morning brought a cold October drizzle to Brooklyn, and Mike arrived at Gleason's to find his night's work undone. Someone had spray-painted "Old School equals NO School" across the front window in jagged red letters, the paint still tacky from the overnight dampness. Mike stared at the vandalism for a moment, then walked to the supply closet for solvent and a razor blade. He worked methodically, scraping and cleaning with the same patient care he brought to every task. 25 minutes later, the window was spotless again, as if the insult had never existed. The morning crowd arrived to find Mike finishing up, and word of Derek's performance had spread through the neighborhood overnight. Eddie Santos looked like he hadn't slept, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by quiet defeat. "My grandson called," Eddie confided as he slowly wrapped his hands. Kids at his school were passing around videos, laughing at the old man trying to box. 47 years I've been coming here, Mike. 47 years, and now I'm a joke on the internet. Frank DeLuca was equally upset, pacing near the heavy bags with more energy than his arthritis usually allowed. We should ban that punk, he declared. Call the cops if he comes back. Mike continued organizing equipment, but spoke quietly. Running from disrespect doesn't teach respect, Frank. Something in his voice made the other fighters pause. They looked to Mike for guidance, though none could explain why. There was authority in his manner, a quiet confidence that suggested he'd faced bigger bullies than Derek Castellano. Tommy arrived an hour later, moving with the nervous energy Mike had come to recognize. The kid went straight to the speed bag, working out frustration with rapid-fire combinations. During a water break, Tommy opened up about his home situation. My mom's working 3 jobs now since the diner cut her hours, he said. Some guys in suits keep coming around, telling the owner his lease is up for review. Same thing's happening to half the businesses on the block. Mike nodded, filing away. Another piece of a puzzle he was beginning to understand. Neighborhood pressure, systematic intimidation. He'd seen it before in other cities, other communities under siege. The bullies who gave you that black eye, Mike said. They connected to those suits. Tommy looked surprised that Mike had noticed, then nodded. Marcus Reed's crew. They work for some guy who's buying up properties. Said I need to convince my mom to take whatever offer comes her way. At exactly 2 o'clock, Derek's convoy returned with reinforcements. This time he brought professional camera equipment, a sound crew, and what looked like a genuine news team. His overnight viral success had attracted bigger fish, and Derek was feeding off the attention like a shark in bloody water. The Ferrari's engine echoed off the brick buildings as Derek stepped out wearing full professional kickboxing gear. His movements were more theatrical now, playing to cameras he knew were rolling. Success had made him bolder, crueler. Time to separate the legends from the has-beens, Derek announced as his crew invaded the gym. Brooklyn boxing ends today. But Mike continued his quiet work, knowing that some endings were really just beginnings in disguise. That Derek's setup was professional this time. Multiple camera angles, professional lighting, and a live stream audience that had grown to over 50,000 viewers. He dominated the main ring like a conquering general, his kickboxing gear gleaming under the lights. Traditional boxing is dead, Derek announced to his cameras. I'm here to prove it by sparring with anyone brave enough to represent this museum. A failure. The challenge hung in the air like a death sentence. Eddie's heart condition made any physical confrontation impossible. Frank's arthritis had left his hands nearly useless for serious combat. The younger members like Tommy had heart, but lacked the experience to safely face someone with Derek's size and training. Derek knew this and exploited it perfectly. 50,000 people are watching, and not one of you has the courage to defend your precious Brooklyn boxing. His voice carried the cruel satisfaction of a bully who'd found the perfect victim. The gym members stood in uncomfortable silence, their dignity being stripped away for entertainment. Derek's chat exploded with mocking comments about old cowards and washed-up wannabes. Walter Murphy arrived for his afternoon shift and surveyed the scene with eyes that had seen real violence, not the manufactured drama of social media. He approached Mike, who continued organizing equipment while observing every detail. I know who you are, Walter said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being believed. Been watching you help these kids for months. Sometimes a good man has to stop being so good. Mike met Walter's gaze and saw recognition there, not just of his identity, but of his character. Walter had the steady presence of someone who'd faced real danger and emerged intact. That Derek's performance reached its crescendo as he continued his livestream mockery. Look at these legends, he told his audience. 60 years of boxing history, and they can't produce one fighter willing to step up. The breaking point came when Walter began cleaning around Derek's equipment. The 73-year-old janitor moved carefully, trying not to interfere with the camera setup, but Derek saw an opportunity for content. Get out of my way, old fool, Derek snarled, shoving Walter hard enough to send him stumbling toward the ropes. Walter caught himself, but the humiliation was complete and captured in high definition. I should have you fired for ruining my shot, Derek continued, playing to his audience's bloodlust. Pathetic old man doesn't know when he's not wanted. The gym fell silent except for the sound of Derek's live stream chat, encouraging more violence. But Mike had stopped organizing equipment. Something fundamental had shifted in his expression. The careful neutrality replaced by something much more dangerous. He removed his work gloves and set down his cleaning supplies. His movements were different now, not the cautious steps of someone avoiding attention, but the measured approach of a predator who'd selected his prey. Derek noticed the maintenance man walking toward the ring and laughed for his cameras. "This is perfect. Even the janitor wants to fight me now." Mike stepped through the ropes and stood in the center of the ring, still wearing his paint-stained work clothes. The contrast was deliberate. Derek in his professional gear, facing a man who looked like he'd rather be mopping floors. "One round," Mike said quietly, his distinctive voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "Then you leave these people alone." Derek's eyes lit up with predatory glee. This was exactly what his audience wanted. Youth dominating age. Modern strength crushing old-school weakness. His follower count was climbing by the thousands. "Even the janitor wants to fight me," Derek repeated for his cameras, his voice dripping with theatrical contempt. But Mike just stood there, patient as stone, waiting for Derek to finish his performance and face the consequences of his choices. The contrast was striking and deliberate. Derek stood in professional kickboxing gear worth more than most people's monthly salary, while Mike remained in work boots, faded jeans, and a gray t-shirt that had seen better decades. The younger man looked like he belonged on magazine covers. The maintenance man looked like he belonged in a factory. Derek's cameraman, Joey Martinez, adjusted his angle to capture the David and Goliath moment, but something nagged at him. The maintenance man's silhouette seemed familiar, the way he held his shoulders, the economical movements as he prepared for battle. Joey suddenly grabbed his phone and started searching frantically. His face went pale as recognition hit him like a physical blow. He began waving desperately at Bridget Kane, Derek's social media manager, but she was too focused on the live stream numbers to notice. Mike simply removed his shirt, revealing a torso that told the story of a lifetime dedicated to combat. His build was different from Derek's lean athleticism. Thicker, more powerful, with the kind of muscle that came from decades of hitting and being hit. Scars mapped his ribs and shoulders, each one a lesson learned the hard way. "Walter," Mike called quietly. "You got any hand wraps?" Walter moved with purpose, producing wraps from his cleaning cart, like a cornerman who'd been waiting for this moment all his life. Mike's hands moved with muscle memory as he began the familiar ritual of preparation, each wrap placed with the precision of someone who'd done this thousands of times. Derek continued his performance, calling Mike Grandpa and promising to go easy on the old man. His livestream audience had swollen to 75,000 viewers, all waiting to see youth triumph over age. "This is going to be embarrassing for you," Derek announced, shadowboxing for his cameras. "But don't worry, I'll make sure the knockout looks spectacular." Joey finally got Bridget's attention and shoved his phone screen in her face. Her expression changed instantly from excitement to terror as she realized what was about to happen. She began signaling frantically to Derek, but he was too caught up in his performance to notice. Joey managed to catch Derek's eye during a pause in his monologue and held up the phone screen. Derek glanced over, and his face went through a series of rapid changes, confusion, recognition, then a desperate attempt to maintain his bravado. "Iron Mike," Derek said, his voice slightly less confident than before. "More like Rusty Mike. Being famous 30 years ago doesn't make you dangerous today." But even as he spoke, Derek's movements became more cautious. The maintenance man across from him wasn't shadowboxing or warming up. He was just standing there with the patience of someone who'd learned that real fights were won in the mind before they ever reached the fists. The bell rang with the sharp clarity of Judgment Day. Mike took his stance, the classic peekaboo style that had terrorized a generation of heavyweights. Hands high, elbows tight, head moving in small circles that made him nearly impossible to hit cleanly. Even at 58, even in work boots, the form was perfect. Derek charged forward, confident in his youth and reach advantages, ready to end this quickly and claim his viral moment. He had no idea he was about to face 40 years of accumulated knowledge, technique refined through thousands of rounds, and punching power that had once been considered supernatural. The gym held its breath as two different eras of combat sports were about to collide. Derek opened with a high kick, trying to use his kickboxing background to exploit what he assumed was Mike's limited experience with mixed techniques. The kick was fast, well executed, and completely irrelevant. Mike slipped it with the timing that had made him heavyweight champion of the world, moving his head just enough to let Derek's shin whistle harmlessly past. The movement was so subtle, so economical, that it looked like Derek had simply missed. For the next 30 seconds, Mike didn't throw a single punch. He simply moved, slipping Derek's combinations, weaving under his hooks, making the younger man miss by margins so small. They seemed like accidents. Derek's technique was legitimate, his conditioning excellent, but he was fighting a ghost. Mike's footwork was poetry in motion. Each step served multiple purposes, creating angles, maintaining balance, setting up counters that never came. The gym members pressed against the ropes, recognizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Even if they didn't fully understand what, Derek began to realize he wasn't fighting a maintenance man. Every combination he threw was anticipated, every feint was ignored, every attempt at power was casually avoided. This was Iron Mike Tyson, and 40 years of ring wisdom couldn't be erased by age or work clothes. Desperation crept into Derek's technique. His combinations became wilder, more theatrical, designed for cameras rather than effectiveness. He threw everything he had: spinning kicks, jumping punches, elaborate combinations that looked impressive but left him constantly out of position. Mike remained patient, content to let Derek exhaust himself while the livestream audience began to understand what they were really watching. The chat exploded with recognition and disbelief as viewers realized they were seeing a legend return to his element at exactly 45 seconds. Derek made his fatal mistake. Frustrated by his inability to land anything meaningful, he loaded up on a telegraphed right hand, putting all his weight behind a punch designed to end the fight in one spectacular moment. Mike saw it coming from the moment Derek shifted his feet. He slipped under the punch with fluid grace, stepped inside Derek's guard, and came up with the left uppercut that had destroyed Michael Spinks in 91 seconds, that had finished Frank Bruno in 5 rounds, that had ended careers and created legends. The punch traveled maybe 8 inches and landed with the sound of a baseball bat hitting a side of beef. Derek's eyes rolled back as the lights went out, his body going completely limp as he crashed to the canvas like a demolished building. The gym erupted. 40 years of pent-up boxing passion exploded in cheers and applause as grown men jumped up and down like children. Tommy climbed onto the ropes, screaming with joy. Eddie Santos wept openly, his humiliation forgotten in the face of perfect justice. Joey's camera captured it all: the knockout, the celebration, and Derek's unconscious form sprawled on the canvas. The livestream chat scrolled by so fast it was unreadable, thousands of messages of shock, awe, and vindication. Derek came to after 30 seconds, his eyes unfocused and confused. Mike helped him to his feet with the same gentle care he'd shown. Frank DeLuca's arthritic hands, demonstrating the grace that separated champions from common bullies. "Next time, son," Mike said quietly, his voice carrying no malice, only instruction. "Remember, respect isn't earned with your mouth." Derek's crew packed up their equipment in stunned silence, their viral moment having become something entirely different from what they'd planned. As they carried Derek toward the exit, Bridget's phone continued streaming to an audience that had grown to over 100,000 viewers, all witnessing the moment when old-school values delivered new-school justice. Mike picked up his shirt and work gloves, ready to return to mopping floors and maintaining equipment. But everyone in Gleason's gym now knew they were working alongside a living legend who just reminded the world why some things never go out of style. 3 hours after the knockout, Derek Castellano sat in a private room at St. Francis Hospital, his jaw wired shut and his pride shattered beyond repair. The concussion had left him dizzy and nauseous, but the real pain came from watching his viral humiliation spread across every social media platform in existence. Vincent Torino arrived at 6 o'clock sharp, his expensive Italian suit and manicured nails a stark contrast to the sterile hospital environment. At 45, Vincent moved with the confidence of a man who solved problems with money and connections rather than personal confrontation. "Jesus Christ, Derek," Vincent said, settling into the visitor's chair. You were supposed to create controversy, not get destroyed by a living legend. Derek tried to respond, but could only manage muffled sounds through his wired jaw. His eyes burned with humiliation and rage, but Vincent wasn't interested in comfort. He was calculating damage control. Vincent's phone buzzed constantly with calls from associates, investors, and partners who'd seen the knockout video. Each conversation was a reminder that Derek's failure had exposed their entire operation to unwanted scrutiny. "Do you understand what you've done?" Vincent continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Mike Tyson isn't just some old maintenance man. He's a celebrity with media connections and a platform. Every news outlet in the country is going to want to interview him about his triumphant return to boxing." Through the window, Vincent could see news vans gathering in the hospital parking lot. Derek's humiliation was becoming a human interest story, and Vincent knew that media attention was poison to his carefully constructed operation. Vincent made a series of phone calls, speaking in code to associates who understood the language of legitimate business fronts and illegal activities. Marcus Reed, his primary lieutenant, would accelerate the pressure campaign on local businesses. Kevin Chong would begin creating digital narratives to discredit Mike's heroic image. But the real problem was deeper than public relations. Vincent's operation depended on intimidating communities while remaining invisible to law enforcement. Derek's viral knockout had painted a target on Gleason's gym and, by extension, on the entire neighborhood development scheme. "We've been systematically acquiring waterfront properties for 3 years," Vincent explained to Derek's confused expression. "Small businesses, residential buildings, community centers, all purchased below market value after we created the right kind of problems for their owners." Derek's eyes widened as he began to understand his role in something much larger than viral content creation. He'd been a tool in a criminal conspiracy, his social media fame providing cover for money laundering and real estate fraud. Vincent's final phone call was to a number Derek didn't recognize. "The Tyson situation is a problem," Vincent said quietly. "We need to accelerate the timeline. How quickly can you have the Romano woman evicted?" As Vincent left the hospital, Derek realized his quest for viral fame had put him at the center of something that could destroy his life in ways much worse than a simple knockout. Mike arrived at Gleason's the next morning to find the gym buzzing with an energy he hadn't felt in months. The knockout video had exploded across social media overnight, bringing positive attention to the old Brooklyn institution for the first time in years. ESPN had left 3 voicemails requesting interviews. Boxing websites were calling Mike's performance a triumphant return to form. Social media was flooded with support for the humble maintenance man who'd reminded everyone that legends never truly retire. New membership applications sat stacked on Sal's desk, young fighters inspired by the viral video, old-timers who wanted to train where Iron Mike worked, and community members who suddenly saw the gym as a symbol of neighborhood pride. But Mike's satisfaction was interrupted when Mrs. Catherine Romano arrived unexpectedly at 10 o'clock. The 78-year-old property owner looked tired and frightened, her usual composed demeanor cracked by weeks of mounting pressure. "Mr. Giordano," she said to Sal, "I need to speak with you about the building." Sal led her to his small office, but their conversation carried clearly through the thin walls. Mrs. Romano's voice shook as she described anonymous phone calls threatening her safety, her car being vandalized twice in the past week, and strange men following her to the grocery store. Mike continued cleaning equipment, but positioned himself to hear every word. Walter joined him, both men understanding that Mrs. Romano's problems were connected to larger forces threatening the entire neighborhood. "They want me to sell," Mrs. Romano continued. "Say it's time for development, time for progress. But this building has been in my family for 30 years. My husband bought it as an investment in the community." After she left, Mike quietly approached Walter about other businesses having similar problems. Walter's sharp eyes confirmed what Mike suspected, a pattern of harassment designed to force property sales. "Luigi's restaurant closed last month after repeated health department violations that appeared overnight," Walter said. "Martinez Auto Shop lost their permits mysteriously, and the community recreation center was condemned after a suspicious fire." Tommy arrived and immediately noticed the tension. As he wrapped his hands for training, he showed Mike social media posts celebrating the knockout. but also revealed something more troubling. I did some digging into Derek's management company, Tommy said, pulling up information on his phone. Torino Sports Entertainment is connected to shell companies that have purchased 8 properties in this neighborhood over the past 2 years, all bought below market value from owners who'd been having mysterious problems. Mike studied the information with growing understanding. Derek's viral humiliation wasn't random social media content. It was part of a systematic campaign to destroy community institutions and force property sales. That evening, as Mike locked up the gym, he found a brick on the floor near the front window. Glass crunched under his feet as he picked up the attached note. Champions retire. Smart ones stay retired. Mike examined the crude threat and understood that his moment of justice had awakened something much more dangerous than Derek's wounded pride. This wasn't about boxing anymore. It was about protecting a community under siege. He looked up at the photos of boxing legends lining the gym walls, men who'd faced much worse than anonymous threats and real estate conspiracies. If they could find courage in this same space, so could he. 2 days later, Mike walked through the narrow streets of Brooklyn to Mrs. Romano's apartment above the corner grocery store. She'd called that morning, her voice barely above a whisper, asking him to come alone and bring no one else. The apartment was small but immaculately maintained, filled with photographs spanning 50 years of neighborhood life. Mrs. Romano led Mike to her late husband's study, where cardboard boxes lined the walls like evidence in a federal case. Antonio was FBI for 26 years, she said, opening the nearest box to reveal hundreds of files meticulously organized by date and subject. He specialized in organized crime investigations, particularly real estate, fraud, and money laundering schemes. Mike examined the documents with growing comprehension. Antonio Romano had spent his career tracking families like the Benedettis, documenting how they used legitimate businesses to wash illegal money while systematically destroying communities for profit. Vincent Torino, Mrs. Romano said, pointing to a file thick with surveillance photos and financial records. Antonio was investigating him when he died 5 years ago. Heart attack, they said, but he'd been getting threats for months. The file revealed Vincent's true identity. Vincent Benedetti, nephew of crime boss Anthony Benedetti, educated in business and law to provide sophisticated fronts for family operations. Derek's management company was just one of dozens of shell businesses designed to move money and acquire property. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Through the window, Mike watched Vincent Torino step out of a black Lincoln, accompanied by 2 associates in expensive suits who moved like professional intimidators. Mrs. Romano, Vincent called through the door, his voice friendly but carrying an undertone of threat. I'm here with a final offer on your property. Very generous terms. Mike positioned himself where he could observe but remain unseen as Mrs. Romano reluctantly opened the door. Vincent entered with practiced charm, his associates flanking him like well-dressed predators. $15 million, Vincent announced, placing a contract on her kitchen table. Cash sale, 30-day closing, and we'll handle all the legal complications. Mrs. Romano's voice trembled as she responded. The building appraised at $22 million last year. Vincent's smile never wavered, but his eyes turned cold. Real estate values fluctuate, Mrs. Romano, especially when properties develop problems. Electrical issues, plumbing failures, structural concerns that require expensive repairs. Mike recognized the barely veiled threat. Vincent wasn't just offering money. He was promising that refusing the offer would result in manufactured problems. That would force a sale anyway. I need time to think, Mrs. Romano said. Of course, Vincent replied, but his tone suggested time was a luxury she didn't possess. However, I should mention that development in this area is inevitable. Property owners who cooperate with progress tend to have fewer complications than those who resist change. After Vincent left, Mike helped Mrs. Romano secure the apartment and promised to return the next day to review more of her husband's files. As he walked home through the darkening streets, Mike understood that Derek's humiliation had been the opening move in a much larger game. The Benedetti family had been systematically acquiring neighborhood property for years, using intimidation, manufactured violations, and financial pressure to force below-market sales. Derek's viral content was supposed to discredit Gleason's gym and justify its closure, paving the way for another forced sale. But Mike's knockout had disrupted their careful timeline and brought unwanted attention to their operation. Now they faced a choice: retreat and abandon years of planning, or escalate their tactics to eliminate the threat Mike represented. Mike looked up at the photos of boxing legends on his way out, knowing that his real fight was just beginning. Mike's transformation from maintenance man to community organizer began with a simple phone call to Sal Giordano. Using his newfound celebrity status from the viral knockout, Mike proposed a neighborhood meeting to address the systematic harassment affecting local businesses. "We'll hold it at the gym," Mike said. "People trust this place now. They'll come if they know Iron Mike Tyson is asking for their help." Word spread through the community like wildfire. The legendary boxer who'd humbled Derek Castellano was calling for unity against the forces threatening their neighborhood. By 7 o'clock that evening, 43 local business owners had crowded into Gleason's gym. Mike stood in the main ring, not as a fighter, but as a neighbor who'd recognized a pattern others had missed. Restaurant owners, shopkeepers, building superintendents, and community leaders filled the folding chairs Walter had arranged throughout the gym. "Most of you know me as the maintenance man who got lucky against that social media punk," Mike began, his distinctive voice carrying clearly through the space. "But I didn't get lucky. I got angry. Angry at seeing good people disrespected and community institutions under attack." Maria Santos, who owned the Mexican restaurant 2 blocks away, stood up first. "My family's been in this neighborhood for 20 years. Last month, health inspectors found violations that weren't there the day before. Contaminated food, improper storage, electrical problems, all appearing overnight." Jerome Washington, the local barber, displayed photographs on his phone showing repeated vandalism to his shop. "Every time I refuse calls from development companies, something happens. Windows broken, locks glued shut, graffiti that takes hours to clean off." Tommy had prepared a digital presentation showing the pattern Mike suspected but couldn't prove alone. Using his computer skills, the teenager had created a map displaying all properties purchased by Benedetti Shell companies over the past 3 years. 8 businesses forced to sell below market value, Tommy explained to the gathering, all after experiencing mysterious problems that appeared right after they refused initial purchase offers. The room buzzed with recognition as business owners realized they weren't facing individual bad luck. They were victims of a coordinated campaign designed to destabilize the entire neighborhood for profit. Mike proposed a community defense strategy that utilized his celebrity status and their collective knowledge. Business owners would document all harassment, share security footage through a network Tommy would establish, and support each other when officials visited for suspicious inspections. Eddie Santos volunteered to coordinate with other boxing gyms throughout Brooklyn, creating a communication network that could spread information quickly. Frank DeLuca used his union connections to pressure city officials who might be compromised by Benedetti influence. Walter quietly mentioned he still had friends in law enforcement who might be interested in documented patterns of harassment and property acquisition fraud. The meeting ended with renewed hope and determination. For the first time in months, community members felt they had allies and a plan to fight back against the forces trying to destroy their neighborhood. But Vincent Torino sat in his car across the street, taking photographs of everyone who attended. Marcus Reed, positioned at the corner, captured license plate numbers and identified faces using facial recognition software on his phone at BY midnight. Vincent had compiled a complete list of attendees, their businesses, and their vulnerabilities. If Mike Tyson wanted to organize community resistance, Vincent would show him what happened to communities that refused to cooperate with progress. The war for Brooklyn's waterfront had officially begun, and Vincent intended to win it using methods that would make Derek Castellano's social media humiliation look like child's play. 1 week after the community meeting, Mike's organizing efforts were showing remarkable results. Channel 7 News had run a positive story about neighborhood revitalization, featuring interviews with business owners who'd found new hope through collective action. The segment portrayed Gleason's gym as a symbol of community resistance against urban decay and corporate intimidation. Social media buzzed with support for the cause. The hashtag #SaveBrooklyn had generated thousands of posts from boxing fans, community activists, and celebrities who'd been inspired by Mike's transformation. From viral knockout artist to neighborhood advocate, donations poured into the gym's newly established community fund. Online contributions came from across the country: $5 from a retired teacher in Ohio, $50 from a veteran in Texas, $1,000 from a tech executive in California who'd grown up watching Mike fight. The total had reached $47,000 in just 6 days. Several celebrities had publicly endorsed the cause. Former heavyweight champions shared the story with their followers. Actors who'd grown up in similar neighborhoods offered financial support. And politicians began taking notice of the grassroots movement building around Iron Mike Tyson's second act. Derek, meanwhile, was attempting his own comeback. His jaw had healed enough to record podcast appearances where he claimed the knockout was lucky and demanded a rematch to settle things properly. But his social media following had largely abandoned him, migrating toward more successful influencers who hadn't been humiliated by a 58-year-old maintenance man. Vincent controlled Derek's rehabilitation narrative, using the young fighter's desperation to generate sympathy and rebuild his brand around themes of redemption and second chances. Every appearance was carefully scripted to position Derek as a victim of Iron Mike's unprovoked violence. But Vincent's real focus was on counterattacking the community organization that threatened his operation. Mrs. Romano's grocery store failed a surprise health inspection when inspectors discovered contaminated meat that hadn't been there the previous day. The fire department suddenly declared the gym's electrical wiring unsafe, requiring immediate repairs that would cost $30,000 and force a temporary closure. Mike and Walter investigated these new violations with growing certainty that they were manufactured. The electrical problems consisted of loosened connections that could have been sabotaged in minutes. The contaminated meat showed signs of deliberate tampering rather than natural spoilage. Tommy's hacking skills proved invaluable as he traced the false violations to low-level city employees who'd received cash payments from Benedetti-connected shell companies. The systematic corruption went deeper than anyone had imagined. They're not just targeting individual businesses, Tommy explained to Mike and Walter in the gym's basement. They're bribing inspectors, fire marshals, and health department officials to create violations on demand. It's like a violation manufacturing service. Mike realized they weren't just fighting neighborhood bullies. They were exposing a criminal organization that had infected every level of city government. The stakes had escalated far beyond saving a boxing gym, but the community's success was also creating unexpected vulnerabilities. Media attention meant their every move was being watched, and Vincent's resources for creating problems were virtually unlimited. As donations continued to pour in and celebrities offered support, Mike understood that their growing strength was also painting a larger target on their backs. Vincent wouldn't retreat in the face of organized resistance. He would escalate until the threat was permanently eliminated. Community organizing and the role of celebrity advocacy in fighting corruption. Mike's media appearances began with a morning show interview on Channel 4, where his celebrity status from the viral knockout gave him a platform politicians couldn't ignore. Sitting across from anchor Patricia Walsh, Mike methodically laid out the evidence of systematic neighborhood harassment. "These aren't isolated incidents," Mike explained, his distinctive voice carrying the authority of someone who'd faced much bigger fights. When 8 businesses on the same waterfront corridor all experienced mysterious violations within weeks of refusing purchase offers, that's not coincidence. That's conspiracy. The interview footage showed Mike's evidence: photographs of overnight graffiti, documentation of impossible health violations, and Tommy's digital map connecting the harassment to shell company property acquisitions. His calm presentation made the criminal pattern undeniable. CNN picked up the story for their afternoon news cycle, framing it as a David and Goliath battle between corporate intimidation and community organizing. Mike's transformation from knockout artist to neighborhood advocate provided the human interest angle that made the story nationally relevant. City council members who'd ignored similar complaints for years suddenly found themselves fielding calls from reporters asking about their response to Iron Mike Tyson's allegations. Council President Janet Morrison announced the formation of a task force to examine irregularities in permit processing and inspection procedures. The mayor held an impromptu press conference promising a full investigation into real estate acquisition Practices in waterfront neighborhoods. Federal agencies began asking quiet questions about unusual property transactions and suspicious business relationships, that Mike's political impact was immediate and measurable. The gym received official exemptions from the electrical violations pending review. Mrs. Romano's grocery store passed a re-inspection conducted by different officials who found no contamination. 3 Benedetti shell companies were placed under financial investigation by the State Attorney General's office. Major news networks announced plans for feature stories examining urban gentrification. Knockout had evolved into something much more significant than sports entertainment. But Derek's desperate podcasting was becoming increasingly unstable. Unable to accept his humiliation, he posted increasingly aggressive videos challenging Mike to a real fight and making wild accusations about the gym running illegal gambling operations. Vincent realized the public attention was becoming dangerous. For the entire Benedetti operation, multiple family businesses were now under scrutiny. Law enforcement agencies were asking uncomfortable questions, and their carefully maintained invisibility had been shattered by one 58-year-old boxer in his office overlooking the harbor. Vincent made a calculated decision that would determine whether the family's 3-year investment in waterfront development would pay off or destroy them all. He picked up his phone and called Kevin Chong, the technology specialist who'd helped them manufacture violations and create false narratives for years. "I need Iron Mike Tyson to look like a criminal by tomorrow night. Whatever it takes." Chang's expertise in digital manipulation and evidence creation had served the family well, but Vincent's new request would require sophisticated fabrication on a scale they'd never attempted. "We're talking about framing a celebrity with federal charges," Chong warned. "If this goes wrong, we're all looking at serious prison time." Vincent's voice carried the cold certainty of someone who'd crossed too many lines to retreat now. "If it goes right, we eliminate the biggest threat this family has faced in 20 years. Get it done." The community celebration filled Gleason's gym beyond capacity, with supporters spilling onto the street through open-fire doors. Local politicians, media representatives, and boxing celebrities mixed with neighborhood residents who'd found new hope through collective action. Mike stood in the main ring, surrounded by the same community that had seemed so defeated just weeks earlier. The transformation was remarkable. Business owners who'd been isolated by fear now stood together with renewed confidence, their shared struggle having forged genuine bonds. 3 weeks ago, I was just the maintenance man who got lucky. Against a social media bully, Mike began, his voice carrying clearly through the packed gym. But I didn't get lucky. We got organized. We proved that when good people stand together, bullies back down. The crowd erupted in applause that echoed off the walls lined with boxing legends. Tommy beamed with pride from his position near the ropes, his computer skills having proved crucial to exposing the conspiracy. Walter stood with Mrs. Romano, both understanding that community defense required courage from every generation. CNN's cameras captured the scene for their upcoming documentary about community organizing and fighting urban corruption. Magazine photographers documented Mike's evolution from viral knockout artist to neighborhood leader, his story becoming a symbol of resistance against corporate intimidation. Behind the scenes, Vincent's operation worked frantically through the night. Kevin Chang's team used sophisticated software to create doctored audio recordings of Mike discussing gambling operations and money laundering. They planted fabricated betting records in the gym's computer system and prepared evidence that would suggest Mike had been using his boxing contacts to run illegal sports betting. Derek, desperate for relevance and promised redemption, agreed to serve as a confidential informant for the manufactured federal case. His testimony about Mike's criminal activities would provide prosecutors with the witness they needed to justify arrests and search warrants. Federal agents, acting on Vincent's fabricated evidence, prepared search warrants for Gleason's gym. The criminal case they'd been given appeared professionally convincing. Financial records suggesting systematic money laundering, audio recordings of illegal activities, and witness testimony from Derek Castellano about Mike's criminal enterprise. The celebration continued past midnight, with community members sharing stories of hope and plans for neighborhood improvement. Mike's speech about community power and standing up to bullies had energized people who'd felt powerless for years. They the evening wound down. Mike helped clean up the gym with the same quiet dedication he'd shown as maintenance man. He arranged chairs, swept confetti, and ensured everything was ready for the next day's training sessions. Tommy stayed late to help, his young face glowing with the satisfaction of meaningful work. "Think we really beat them, Mr. Mike?" Mike smiled, but chose his words carefully. "We proved they can be beaten, son. That's different than beating them. Real bullies don't give up easy when they're losing money." Walter locked up the gym that night with extra care, his police instincts warning him that victories often provoked more dangerous responses from desperate criminals. But even his experienced paranoia couldn't have prepared him for what Vincent had planned. At dawn, federal agents would surround Gleason's gym with search warrants based on expertly fabricated evidence. Mike's triumph would become his downfall, and the community that had rallied around him would watch their hero destroyed by lies sophisticated enough to fool federal prosecutors that Vincent's final gambit was about to transform Iron Mike Tyson from neighborhood savior into federal criminal, eliminating the biggest threat the Benedetti family had faced in decades. Mike arrived at Gleason's gym at his usual time to find federal agents surrounding the building like an occupying army. Black SUVs blocked both ends of the street while agents in tactical gear positioned themselves at every entrance and exit. Agent Patricia Henley stepped forward as Mike approached the front door, her FBI credentials gleaming in the morning light. News cameras filmed from across the street, their telephoto lenses capturing every detail of Iron Mike Tyson's apparent downfall. "Michael Gerard Tyson," Henley announced formally. "I have warrants to search these premises for evidence of illegal gambling operations, money laundering, and racketeering activities." Mike's expression remained calm as he processed the surreal scene. 3 weeks earlier, he'd been an anonymous maintenance man. Now federal agents were treating him like the head of a criminal organization. The search was thorough and devastating. Agents discovered the planted evidence Kevin Chong had spent days preparing: falsified betting sheets hidden in Mike's locker, doctored financial records on the gym's computers, and fabricated audio recordings of conversations that had never taken place. The evidence appeared professionally convincing to investigators who didn't know it had been manufactured using sophisticated technology. Computer files showed systematic money laundering through boxing match betting, audio recordings captured Mike discussing illegal operations, and financial documents revealed a complex criminal enterprise. Tommy Rodriguez was arrested as he arrived for morning training. Agents claiming the 16-year-old was Mike's numbers runner, who collected bets from high school students. The charges against the teenager could result in federal prison time, turning a community volunteer into a criminal defendant overnight. The media narrative shifted instantly and brutally. News outlets that had celebrated Mike's community organizing now ran stories about his alleged criminal activities. Social media exploded with accusations and condemnation as his heroic image crumbled in real time. The same political supporters who'd promised investigations into neighborhood harassment now distanced themselves from the disgraced boxer. City council members canceled scheduled meetings, federal grants were frozen, and celebrity endorsements evaporated like morning mist. Derek Castellano emerged from his rehabilitation to claim vindication, posting a video statement saying he'd known something was wrong. With Mike's sudden community leadership, his social media followers began returning, drawn to his apparent prescience about the fallen legend. Vincent watched the news coverage from his office, satisfaction evident in his cold smile. The federal investigation would take years to resolve, providing ample time to complete property acquisitions and eliminate anyone who might expose the real conspiracy. Mike sat in the empty gym that evening, forbidden from operating it while under investigation. The walls still displayed photos of boxing legends, but their inspiration felt distant now. His phone buzzed constantly with interview requests from reporters eager to document his fall from grace. Tommy called from juvenile detention, his young voice frightened and confused. "Mr. Mike, they're saying I helped you run illegal gambling. I don't understand what's happening." Mike closed his eyes and felt the weight of consequences he'd never anticipated. His moment of justice against Derek had evolved into community organizing, which had triggered federal charges that could destroy innocent lives. But somewhere in his boxer's heart, Mike understood that Vincent's desperation to frame him revealed the criminal organization's vulnerability. They wouldn't have risked federal attention unless his community organizing had threatened something valuable enough to justify such extreme measures. The fight wasn't over. It had simply moved to a battlefield where knockout punches wouldn't. Determined the winner. 1 week after the federal raid, Mike's world had collapsed into isolation and suspicion. Former supporters avoided his calls. Media requests had shifted from heroic interviews to requests for comments on his criminal activities, and the gym sat empty except for the few people who still believed in his innocence. Mike worked quietly in the basement, officially forbidden from operating the gym while under federal investigation. The space felt like a bunker now, separated from the world above where his reputation was being systematically destroyed by expertly manufactured evidence. Walter arrived at noon carrying coffee and the grim expression of someone who'd made a difficult decision. Time to stop pretending, Mike. I'm Detective Walter Murphy, retired NYPD Organized Crime Unit, 30 years on the force. Mike looked up from the equipment he was organizing, unsurprised by the revelation. Walter's observational skills and careful questions had always suggested law enforcement background. Been watching this neighborhood for 2 years, Walter continued. Took the janitor job here because I suspected Benedetti operations, but I needed evidence before contacting anyone official. Mrs. Romano arrived an hour later carrying another box of her late husband's FBI files, these even more detailed than the ones she'd shown Mike before. Antonio Romano's investigation into Vincent Torino had been extensive, documenting financial patterns that matched the current real estate scheme perfectly. Antonio died before he could present this evidence, Mrs. Romano said, spreading surveillance photos and financial records across the basement's makeshift table. Heart attack, they claimed, but he'd been getting death threats for months. The three unlikely allies, disgraced boxing legend, retired detective, and FBI agent's widow, realized they possessed enough historical evidence to understand the conspiracy, but lacked current proof to challenge the federal case against Mike. Tommy's call from juvenile detention provided the breakthrough they needed. His cellmate turned out to be Marcus Reed's younger brother, who'd revealed crucial intelligence during a moment of teenage bragging. He said Derek's evidence against you was made up in Vincent's office. Tommy whispered into the contraband phone. Said his brother Marcus was there when they recorded the fake audio of you talking about gambling. Walter immediately understood the implications. If we can prove the evidence was fabricated using technology, the entire federal case collapses. But we need current proof of their operation. Mike refused to consider hiding while Tommy faced federal charges for crimes he'd never committed. That kid believed in me when nobody else did. I'm not letting him go to prison for my fight with these people. Mrs. Romano pulled out equipment her late husband had used for surveillance operations, cameras, recording devices, and communication. Gear that could document criminal activities without alerting targets. Walter made the final call to Detective Lisa Hernandez, his former partner now with the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force. He arranged a clandestine meeting to share Antonio Romano's files and request official support for their unofficial investigation. This is about to get very dangerous, Walter warned as they prepared to leave the basement. The Benedettis don't leave witnesses when their operations are threatened. Mike looked around at the photos of boxing legends still lining the gym walls, men who'd faced their own battles with courage and determination. If they could find strength in this same space, so could he. The abandoned warehouse near the Brooklyn Navy Yard felt like neutral ground as Walter led Mike and Mrs. Romano through its darkened entrance at midnight. Detective Lisa Hernandez waited inside, her federal credentials and suspicious expression making clear she was taking enormous professional risks by meeting them. Hernandez was 42 with the alert bearing of someone who'd spent years tracking dangerous criminals. She examined Antonio Romano's files with growing recognition, her face reflecting both admiration and concern as she realized the scope of evidence they'd preserved. Your husband was investigating the same financial networks we're tracking now, Hernandez told Mrs. Romano. His documentation aligns perfectly with current FBI investigations into Benedetti money laundering operations. But her next revelation was devastating. The agents working your case have been fed false information through compromised sources. They genuinely believe you're running illegal gambling operations because the evidence appears professionally manufactured. Hernandez confirmed Walter's suspicions about Vincent's true identity. Vincent Torino is Vincent Benedetti, nephew of crime boss Anthony Benedetti. He's been using sports management as a front for washing drug money through fake endorsement, deals, and social media contracts. The pieces fell into place as the three investigators shared their evidence. Mrs. Romano's historical files, Walter's neighborhood observations, and Tommy's intelligence from detention created a clear picture of criminal conspiracy spanning decades. Derek was never just a client, Hernandez explained. He was an unwitting front for laundering millions through his social media empire. Every endorsement deal, every appearance fee, every viral moment was actually drug money being cleaned through legitimate entertainment contracts. But Hernandez's warning chilled them all. Exposing this operation will put you in mortal danger. Vincent Benedetti has killed to protect much smaller secrets than this. If he realizes you're investigating him, you're all dead. Mike's response was immediate and final. I won't hide while Tommy faces prison for crimes he didn't commit. That kid deserves better than being sacrificed to protect my safety. Walter understood the strategic situation. We can't fight the federal case directly. The manufactured evidence is too sophisticated. We need to expose the entire Benedetti operation to make Mike's frame-up irrelevant. Hernandez identified their crucial weakness. Kevin Chang's technology operation is the key. If you can prove the evidence against Mike was fabricated using deepfake technology, the entire federal case collapses. But Chang's operation is protected by layers of security and criminal muscle. Mrs. Romano's files revealed Chang had been creating false evidence for years, not just against Mike. Restaurant violations, building inspections, financial audits, all manufactured using sophisticated digital manipulation to support Benedetti real estate acquisitions. Chang's probably created fake evidence for dozens of property seizures, Walter realized. If we expose his operation, we'll free entire neighborhoods from this conspiracy. Hernandez agreed to provide intelligence and unofficial support, but warned she couldn't intervene directly without compromising federal investigations. If you're caught investigating active criminal subjects, I can't protect you. As they prepared to leave, Mike understood they were committing to a path that would either expose one of New York's most sophisticated criminal operations or get them all killed in the attempt. But Tommy Rodriguez was sitting in juvenile detention, facing federal charges for believing in community organizing and helping an old maintenance man stand up to bullies. That was enough reason to risk everything. Mike, Walter, and Mrs. Romano established their surveillance post in an abandoned office, building across from Torino Sports Entertainment, using Antonio Romano's professional equipment to document Vincent's daily operations. The space felt like a war room, with cameras positioned at multiple windows and communication gear connecting them to Detective Hernandez. 3 days of careful observation revealed Vincent's predictable routine. Daily meetings with Marcus Reed at 10 o'clock, weekly visits from Kevin Chang on Wednesdays, and regular contact with city officials who arrive through the building's underground parking garage to avoid being seen. Derek's attempted comeback was failing spectacularly despite Vincent's manipulation of the redemption narrative. His podcast appearances generated minimal engagement, sponsors continued abandoning him, and his social media metrics showed he'd lost credibility even among his core followers. Vincent's pressure on Derek was escalating daily. Phone conversations, captured through directional microphones, revealed increasingly desperate demands for content that would finish Mike Tyson permanently and restore Derek's marketability as a social media influencer. Walter followed Kevin Chang to his technology facility in Queens, discovering a sophisticated operation that went far beyond simple video editing. Chang's team had been manufacturing false evidence for multiple criminal enterprises, not just the Benedetti family, but other organized crime groups who needed digital manipulation to support their activities. This isn't just about framing Mike, Walter reported back to the team. Chang's created an entire industry around manufacturing fake evidence. Court cases, insurance claims, regulatory violations. He's been corrupting the legal system for years. Mrs. Romano's sharp eyes proved invaluable for identifying visitors to Vincent's office. She recognized City Councilman Richard Foster, who'd publicly supported the task force investigating neighborhood harassment while secretly taking Benedetti money to sabotage it from within. Foster's been to Vincent's office 4 times this week, Mrs. Romano documented. He's feeding inside information about federal investigations while pretending to support community organizing. Tommy's intelligence from juvenile detention became increasingly urgent. His cellmate revealed that Marcus Reed was bragging about a big operation plan for the following week, something involving Derek and the gym that would solve the Tyson problem permanently. They're not just planning to discredit Mike, Tommy whispered during one of his contraband phone calls. Marcus said his brother was talking about eliminating witnesses and cleaning up loose ends. Mike realized Vincent's desperation was reaching a breaking point. The federal investigation was moving slowly, but media attention on the neighborhood harassment was continuing to attract law enforcement interest in Benedetti operations that Walter's police instincts warned him that desperate criminals made dangerous mistakes. Vincent's feeling pressured from multiple directions. His uncle's expecting results. Federal agents are asking questions, and the longer this drags out, the more likely someone talks. Mrs. Romano suggested they had enough evidence to approach Detective Hernandez with a request for official intervention, but Mike understood that bureaucratic timelines wouldn't protect Tommy from prison or the community from escalating violence. Vincent's going to force a confrontation, Mike predicted. He can't retreat without admitting failure to his family, and he can't wait for the federal case to resolve itself. He's going to try ending this his own way. As if responding to Mike's analysis, Derek posted a new video that evening, his most aggressive yet. The young fighter announced he was planning something special, a final confrontation that would prove he could defeat Iron Mike Tyson in a real fight without rules. Mike watched the video and recognized the desperation in Derek's eyes. Vincent had given him an ultimatum: create the situation that allows for Mike's elimination, or face consequences for the money laundering operation he'd unknowingly participated in for years. The trap was being set, and Mike would have to decide whether to walk into it or watch everyone he'd tried to protect pay the price for his defiance. Vincent Benedetti sat across from his Uncle Anthony at Romano's restaurant, the private dining room secured from surveillance and interruption. At 73, Anthony Benedetti carried the authority of someone who'd built a criminal empire through 5 decades of careful violence and strategic patience. You turned a simple real estate operation into a federal investigation, Anthony said, his voice carrying the quiet menace that had terrified better men than Vincent. Iron Mike Tyson is now a household name associated with our neighborhood, and every news outlet in the country is examining our property acquisitions. Vincent tried to maintain his composure despite his uncle's obvious displeasure. The situation is under control. The federal charges against Tyson will eliminate him as a threat, and the community organizing will collapse without their celebrity leader. Under control. Anthony's laugh was cold and humorless. 3 of our shell companies are under state investigation. City officials are distancing themselves from our operations. Federal agents are asking questions about financial transactions we've kept hidden for 20 years. The crime boss's patience had clearly reached its limit. Vincent's sophisticated approach to community destruction had attracted exactly the kind of attention their family had spent generations avoiding. You have 72 hours to resolve this permanently, Anthony announced with the finality of a death sentence. Eliminate Tyson, the kid in detention, the old detective, and the Romano woman. Complete the property acquisitions before federal investigators dig deeper into our operations. Vincent understood the implications. Failure would mean his own elimination, along with everyone connected to the botched operation. Success would require killing a boxing legend and 3 innocent people who'd gotten too close to family secrets. That Derek's desperation made him the perfect tool for Vincent's final gambit. The young fighter's career was destroyed, his reputation in ruins, and his financial situation deteriorating rapidly. Vincent had created the perfect conditions for manipulation. You have a choice, Vincent told Derek in his hospital room visit. Create a situation that allows my people to eliminate Tyson during what appears to be a tragic accident during an illegal fight, or face federal charges for the money laundering you unknowingly participated in for 3 years. Derek's eyes widened as Vincent explained the evidence that could destroy his life. Every endorsement deal, appearance fee, and viral moment had actually been drug money being laundered through his social media empire. Federal prosecutors would see him as a willing participant in organized crime. Announce an underground revenge match, Vincent instructed. Livestream it from Gleason's gym. Make it look like Tyson agreed to settle things in an illegal fight. My people will handle the rest during the chaos. Derek's announcement went live that evening, his most desperate video yet. He claimed he'd arranged a real fight without rules with Iron Mike Tyson, promising to live-stream the confrontation that would finally prove his superiority over the washed-up legend. Mike watched the video from the gym's basement and immediately understood the trap. Vincent couldn't wait for the federal case to resolve itself. He needed Mike eliminated quickly and publicly, in a way that would discourage any future community organizing. But Mike also realized that Vincent's desperation revealed the criminal organization's vulnerability. They wouldn't risk federal attention unless his community organizing had genuinely threatened something worth killing to protect. He'll keep escalating until everyone's dead, Mike told Walter and Mrs. Romano. Better to face the threat directly with some control over the circumstances than wait for him to eliminate us one by one. Mrs. Romano contacted Detective Hernandez. With their accumulated evidence, requesting federal backup be positioned near the gym during Derek's planned event. The evidence they'd gathered might not stop Vincent's immediate plans, but it could ensure the larger conspiracy was exposed after the confrontation. Mike began preparing for what he knew would be more than just a fight. This would be a battle for the survival of everyone who dared to threaten the Benedetti family's decades-long stranglehold on Brooklyn's waterfront development. The maintenance man who'd knocked out a social media bully was about to face a test that would determine whether justice or corruption controlled their community's future. The day of Derek's announced revenge match arrived with the weight of inevitability. Mike approached Gleason's gym at noon to find the building surrounded by camera equipment, social media crews, and a growing crowd of spectators who had no idea they were walking into a death trap. Derek had transformed the gym into a professional production studio, complete with multiple camera angles, professional lighting, and streaming equipment that could broadcast to hundreds of thousands of viewers simultaneously. His desperation had given him focus. This was his last chance at redemption, even if it killed him. That Vincent's crew had positioned themselves throughout the space, disguised as Derek's security team and camera operators. Marcus Reed stood near the main entrance, his expensive suit concealing the pistol holstered beneath his jacket. Four other armed men blended into the crowd, each one positioned to eliminate witnesses and create the chaos Vincent needed. Mike surveyed the scene with a fighter's tactical awareness, recognizing the trap while understanding he had no choice but to spring it. Walter took position outside with clear sight lines to all entrances, his retired detective instincts on full alert. Mrs. Romano monitored police communications from her apartment, ready to coordinate with Detective Hernandez's FBI backup team. Positioned 2 blocks away, Tommy arrived despite Mike's explicit orders to stay away, his young face set with determination to stand by the man who'd shown him what courage looked like. The 16-year-old had been released on bail that morning, his ankle monitor the only visible sign of the federal charges hanging over his head. Derek's livestream audience grew throughout the afternoon, reaching 50,000 viewers by 3 o'clock and climbing steadily. The chat scrolled by with comments from boxing fans, social media followers, and curious spectators drawn by the promise of seeing Iron Mike Tyson fight again. Neighborhood residents gathered despite the obvious danger, their loyalty to Mike overriding their common sense. Eddie Santos stood near the ropes with Frank DeLuca and other gym regulars, their presence a testament to the community bonds Derek's original humiliation had accidentally strengthened. As 4 o'clock approached, Derek entered the ring wearing professional gear and the expression of a man facing his own execution. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted his gloves, knowing that Vincent's plan required him to create sufficient provocation on camera to justify what would happen next. Mike stepped through the ropes in his work clothes, still projecting the quiet confidence that had made him legendary. The contrast remained striking. Derek in his expensive equipment facing the maintenance man who'd already destroyed him once before. But this time, both fighters understood the stakes extended far beyond personal pride or social media content. This was about community survival, the price of standing up to organized crime, and whether justice could prevail when corruption controlled every advantage. Vincent watched from his position near the back wall, his manicured hand resting on the pistol beneath his jacket. In 90 seconds, Derek would create enough chaos for Marcus to eliminate Mike while claiming self-defense. The livestream would capture a tragic accident during an illegal fight, ending the biggest threat the Benedetti family had faced in 20 years. The bell rang with the sound of judgment approaching, and Derek threw his first desperate combination toward a man who'd already decided this fight would be his last. Derek opened with the wild aggression of someone fighting for his life, throwing combinations designed more for dramatic effect than tactical advantage. His kickboxing skills were legitimate, but desperation made his techniques sloppy and predictable. Mike slipped every attack with casual precision, his movements economical and patient. But his attention wasn't focused on Derek. He was tracking Vincent's crew as they moved into position around the gym, their hands drifting toward concealed weapons. The livestream audience had swollen to over 100,000 viewers, all watching what they believed was a simple revenge match between a social media star and a boxing legend. They had no idea they were witnessing the final act of a criminal conspiracy that had terrorized an entire neighborhood. At exactly 90 seconds, Vincent gave Marcus Reed the signal. Marcus drew his pistol and moved toward the ring, planning to shoot Mike while claiming Derek was in mortal danger from a violent ex-convict who'd lost control during an illegal fight. Tommy spotted the weapon first. "Gun!" he screamed, his young voice cutting through the noise of the crowd like a fire alarm. Chaos erupted instantly. Gym members dove for cover, while Vincent's other crew members drew their weapons, revealing the trap that had been disguised as entertainment. The livestream chat exploded with confusion and terror as viewers realized they were watching something far more serious than a boxing match. Mike stopped toying with Derek and dropped him with a single uppercut that sent the young fighter crashing unconsciously to the canvas. In one fluid motion, Mike vaulted over the ropes toward Tommy, positioning himself between the teenager and Marcus Reed's pistol. Walter burst through the back in trance with the tactical precision of his police training, moving through Vincent's crew like a professional among amateurs. At 73, he still retained the muscle memory and strategic thinking that had kept him alive through 30 years of dangerous arrests. That Derek's cameras captured everything. Vincent's men drawing weapons on civilians, Mike protecting community members instead of finishing his revenge, and Walter's systematic dismantling of armed criminals who'd expected to face helpless victims. Mrs. Romano arrived with Detective Hernandez and a full FBI tactical team, using her late husband's federal credentials to coordinate the official response. Agents flooded through every entrance as Vincent realized his carefully planned execution had become a federal crime scene broadcast live to hundreds of thousands of witnesses. Vincent drew his own weapon in desperation, knowing that killing Iron Mike Tyson on livestream would send a message to anyone else who dared challenge Benedetti operations. But Mike's boxing reflexes were faster than Vincent's criminal instincts. The maintenance man who'd spent months quietly helping elderly fighters wrap their arthritic hands moved with the speed and precision that had once terrorized heavyweight divisions. He disarmed Vincent without killing him, demonstrating the restraint and wisdom that separated legends from common thugs. Federal agents swarmed the remaining crew members while Derek's livestream continued broadcasting to an audience that had grown to over 200,000 viewers worldwide. The entire conspiracy was being exposed in real time, captured by the same social media obsession that had started this entire conflict. Vincent lay on the gym floor in federal custody, his sophisticated criminal operation destroyed by a 58-year-old maintenance man who'd refused to let bullies terrorize his adopted community. The war for Brooklyn's waterfront was over, and justice had won. Federal agents filled Gleason's gym like an occupying army, their weapons trained on Vincent and his remaining crew members, while Derek's livestream continued broadcasting the surreal scene to over 200,000 viewers worldwide. Vincent pressed his confiscated pistol against his own temple, using himself as a hostage while demanding safe passage to his waiting car. Blood trickled from his nose where Mike's takedown had left him dazed but desperate enough to make one final gambit. "Everyone stays back," Vincent shouted, his voice carrying the hysteria of someone who'd lost everything in the span of 90 seconds. "I'll kill myself before I let you destroy my family's operation." Mike stood 15 feet away, completely calm despite having a gun pointed in his direction by a desperate criminal. His distinctive voice carried clearly through the tense silence that had replaced the earlier chaos. "You already destroyed it yourself, Vincent," Mike said quietly. "The moment you decided to frame innocent people instead of accepting a simple business loss." Detective Hernandez positioned herself between Vincent and the exit, her weapon trained on him while she attempted negotiation. Her FBI training emphasized de-escalation, but Vincent's desperation made him unpredictable and increasingly dangerous. Derek recovered consciousness to find himself in the center of a federal crime scene being broadcast live to the largest audience of his social media career. His concussion made thinking difficult, but he gradually understood that his quest for viral content had led to people dying. For the first time in his adult life, Derek used his camera equipment for something other than self-promotion. He documented Vincent's threats and recorded his confession about manufacturing evidence, providing federal agents with real-time testimony from the conspiracy's mastermind. Walter moved carefully through the crowd of gym members and federal agents, his police experience allowing him to coordinate with FBI tactical teams through subtle hand signals. He had a clear shot at Vincent, but held fire due to civilian proximity and the ongoing livestream coverage. Community members refused to flee despite the obvious danger, instead surrounding Vincent's remaining crew members and providing eyewitness testimony about the criminal conspiracy that had terrorized their neighborhood for years. Mrs. Romano stood with Detective Hernandez, her late husband's federal credentials giving her access to command communications. She coordinated with tactical teams while ensuring Vincent's confession was being properly recorded for federal prosecution. Tommy pressed close to Mike, the teenager's loyalty overriding his fear as he realized the man who'd helped him had risked everything to protect their community. The federal charges hanging over Tommy seemed insignificant compared to watching real courage under fire. Vincent's final desperate attempt came when he realized negotiation was impossible. He lunged toward Mike with the knife he'd concealed in his boot, intending to eliminate the threat that had destroyed 20 years of careful criminal planning. Mike's response demonstrated 40 years of ring experience compressed into a single moment. He slipped Vincent's clumsy attack and used the criminal's momentum against him, sending him crashing into the FBI agents who immediately secured him without further violence. The livestream captured Mike's restraint and wisdom. He could have seriously injured or killed Vincent, but chose to neutralize the threat with minimal force. It was a lesson in character that resonated with hundreds of thousands of viewers who'd watched the entire confrontation unfold. AS federal agents led Vincent away in handcuffs. Derek's livestream audience realized they'd witnessed something unprecedented. A real-time criminal confession broadcast live, the dismantling of an organized crime operation, and a demonstration of genuine heroism from a maintenance man who'd refused to let his community be destroyed. 3 months later, autumn had returned to Brooklyn with the promise of renewal and the satisfaction of justice properly served. The federal trials had dismantled the Benedetti operation with surgical precision, sending Vincent Torino and Kevin Chong to federal prison for sentences that would ensure they never threatened another community. Derek Castellano had testified against Vincent in exchange for reduced charges, his cooperation helping prosecutors understand the full scope of the money laundering operation that had used social media influencers as unwitting fronts for organized crime. His rehabilitation was genuine this time. No cameras, no performance, just the slow work of rebuilding character. Tommy Rodriguez was cleared of all charges and awarded a full scholarship to study computer science at Brooklyn College, with plans to use his technical skills fighting cybercrime after graduation. He continued training at the gym under Mike's guidance, showing natural boxing talent that complemented his digital expertise. Gleason's gym had become a national symbol of community organizing and urban revitalization. Mrs. Romano donated the building to a community trust, ensuring it could never again be threatened by development schemes or criminal intimidation. Federal grants funded renovations and expanded youth programs. Mike returned to his preferred role as maintenance man and mentor, though everyone now acknowledged him as the community leader who'd saved their neighborhood. He still arrived at 5:30 each morning to open the gym, still mopped floors and fixed equipment, still helped elderly fighters wrap their hands with patient care. The broader impact extended far beyond one Brooklyn gym. Former gang members became boxing trainers, sharing hard-won wisdom about choosing courage over easy violence. Elderly residents taught youth programs, connecting generations through shared values of respect and determination. Local businesses thrived under community protection that had replaced criminal intimidation. Walter Murphy was hired as head of security for the newly expanded community center, using his detective experience to help neighborhood businesses document harassment and connect with law enforcement resources. His transition from anonymous janitor to acknowledged protector mirrored Mike's own transformation. Derek made monthly visits to Gleason's gym, quietly apologizing to the people he'd once mocked and learning from the fighters he'd tried to humiliate. He'd closed his social media accounts and begun training seriously at a small gym in New Jersey, pursuing genuine skill rather than viral content. The story's final test came on a cold December morning when a new cocky young fighter entered the gym, seeking to make his reputation by challenging the legends who'd become neighborhood folklore. He was 24, well-trained, and convinced that social media fame could overcome old-school technique. Tommy Rodriguez stepped forward with the quiet confidence Mike had taught him, representing the next generation of protectors who understood that true strength came from defending others rather than proving personal superiority. Mike watched from his corner position, methodically mopping floors and watering the plants that had become his signature contribution to the gym's atmosphere. The cycle was continuing, young arrogance meeting experienced wisdom, community values triumphing over individual ego, justice prevailing over exploitation. The cocky young fighter threw his first combination at Tommy, confident in his youth and training. He had no idea he was facing someone who'd learned from Iron Mike Tyson that real champions are made in the heart, not in the headlines. As Mike continued his quiet work, he smiled at the knowledge that Gleason's gym would survive and thrive long after his own fighting days were completely finished. The community was stronger now, protected by bonds forged through shared struggle and mutual respect. Some victories lasted longer than others, and this one would last forever. If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.